and we're giving it a minute for everything to hop on and be working as we do every time. So I hope nobody gets tired of this. Give it like another minute or two before we actually get started. Thank you guys for your patience. Awesome. Okay. I see that. I'm catching up. All right. I'm just going to give it a minute or two for people to hop on. Just trying to set up a little bit early where I can. I hope everybody is doing well as well for those of you that watch the recording. Hopefully everybody's having fun with their birds. We're in a fun time of year where molting is happening at high speeds. So all of your birds are losing their feathers symmetrically kind of at the same time. So you might have some bald birds, you might have some birds that don't look like they just got out of the wrong side of the bed in the morning. They're all a little bit bedraggled and they're doing their best. That is molting season. They're losing old feathers to get new ones. So they are definitely staying a little bit busier there. So just remember good proteins and fats to help those feathers kind of come in nicely. We do have Feather Pro as well for a supplement for those too, if anybody needs it. Good morning. Thanks so much for tuning in. And hummingbirds are also around in high speeds. So hummingbirds are usually pretty active from anywhere from like July to September, at least in my previous experience. They're usually a lot more busier, kind of a lot more chaotic for a lot of people too. So keep an eye out on those, and hopefully you guys are having a fun time with your hummingbirds as well. So hopefully that's all there good too. All right, it's 8:30, and I see some people are hopping on. So before we get started, I do want to mention that currently, for those, good morning. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. If you are playing Birdie Bingo with us, which in this case, I did not include a little slide to show more about this bingo. This is basically an event we're hosting August to September 30th, where when you stamp off certain items or complete certain tasks, you get a stamp, and when you get 5 stamps in a row, any which way, you get bingo. At the end of the game, you can get up to 4 bingos, and you basically swap those bingos in for 25% off any one item coupons. The educational presentation today counts as a square, so either comment to let me know that you guys are viewing, or when you come into the store next, tell me a fun fact you learned during the presentation, and that'll let us know that you were listening, and we'll stamp that off for you as well too. If you've not started participating in Birdie Bingo, come on in and ask us about it. We're happy to get you set up and get started. It's free to play, so it's just one of those things we're having fun in those in the last bit of summer that we have as well too. But with that, we're gonna go ahead and just jump right into it. Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me today. My name is Jolene. I'm a certified songbird feeding specialist with Wild Birds Unlimited of Concord. And today we are talking about Eastern Towhees, which are an absolute delight. So I hope you guys are ready to learn a lot. If you have any questions during the presentation, definitely feel free to drop a comment. I'll do my best to be paying attention where I can. If I miss it, I will definitely come back to it later as well too. So don't feel like there's a limited time to get your thoughts together as well. So first off, something that's interesting about towhees is that they're actually very closely related to a lot of our sparrows that we have here. They are in the family Passerellidae, which includes our New World sparrows, which is a lot of the Western Hemisphere birds, so North, South America sparrows, juncos, obviously towhees, and some buntings, because buntings are weird. They got split up into 2 different scientific families, so that always makes things interesting. There are actually 6 towhee species in North America. Our primary focus today is the Eastern towhee, but if you go out a little bit further into the Midwest, you might see the spotted towhee as well. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later as to what they look like. Overall, for a lot of towhees, at least especially for the Eastern, you're going to find these guys in a lot of forest edge habitats or areas with a lot of shrubbery. So small tree thickets, very dense kind of low to the ground kind of material, thickets, stuff like that. That's going to be where they're at. That said, they have a pretty good range. So in North Carolina, they're usually here year round. Depending on the range map that you look at, they may be a summer resident in the mountains and they may not be. So it's one of those things where it just depends on temperatures. In this case, the purple is their year round range. So that's when we get them. The orange that goes all the way up to the northern states for the US, as well as a smidge of Canada, is their summer range. Yes, Elizabeth, I will definitely be seeing you with your bingo card. I'm looking forward to it. So the orange kind of range is where a lot of that nesting season habitat happens, and that's usually anywhere from March to August in that kind of season. And then as the weather starts to get cooler, they come back to that year-round habitat, and they also spread out a little bit farther west and a little bit more south. So they do hit parts of Texas during the winter time in that blue portion. The yellow on range maps is usually migrations. So you'll see that in the spring or the fall. They're not usually a resident there, but they do kind of pop in and out as needed. So honestly, these birds are pretty straightforward with ID, but let's talk about it so you can kind of use this to compare it to other birds you may have in the area, right? So these birds are part of the sparrow family, so they honestly do have a very similar shape to a lot of our smaller sparrows, but they're a more medium size. So these guys are probably, I would mark them kind of closer to cardinal size, so they're a little bit larger. They do have that kind of chunky round body, so there's not too much of a neck. Overall kind of that round belly as well too, but they have a very long tail. So unlike, let's think about nuthatches that have a very short squat tail and kind of keeps everything pretty uniform, these guys may be a bit round, but they've got that kind of nice long tail there as well too. They do have a very thick triangular bill. It's not so much as thick as a cardinal's, but it does kind of curve slightly, and it's a very triangular one, so very common with other sparrow species as well. And one thing that's really cool about their visual ID too is that these birds are sexually dimorphic. So your males do look different from your females. The males sport a very nice contrasting black head, wings, and tail, while the females have it's a very pretty, kind of just blends right in to brown color on the head, wings, and tail as well too. That said, they both have kind of those rufous bars along the sides of their belly, and then they have a white belly as well too. Another important feature is that on the tail, they do have white tips on the kind of corners of their tail, not so much in the center. So you can often see that when they're in flight or depending on what kind of displays they're performing as well too. Now, another thing about these birds is you can also ID them by sound. And compared to a lot of other species, what's really nice about these birds is that their song and their call are easily distinguishable from many other species that are happening. So, as a reminder, songs oftentimes happen during nesting season specifically. Usually they're performed by the male. In some species, it can be both. And what it is it starts when the male sets up his nesting territory, when he's trying to keep other potential those guys, competitors, that's the word, when he tries to keep other competitors out of his territory, as well as try to attract potential mate as well too. Now, calls can happen all throughout the year. So what you'll notice is usually in spring at like 6 a.m., it is loud. The birds are singing. There is a lot of noise happening, and that is just a part of nesting. But as we continue through the summer season, get through the fall, and end up in winter, you're going to notice it gets a lot more quiet in the mornings, and that's just because they no longer need to announce that information for nesting season. So they're going to focus more on their calls. Calls are usually a little bit less complicated than songs, and they can be used to communicate a variety of things. Where food is, if they're looking for whoever they're with, if there's a predator in the area. So they both have different features and attributes, and both can be very interesting to listen to. So the first off is the song, which is usually a little bit more complex. For towhees, they only do it during nesting season, and it's essentially drink your tea. And it's a very specific call and a nice onomatopoeia that goes with it. So hopefully my sound is okay, and this is what it sounds like. So that last warble is really important to kind of pay attention to as well. But let's see, a little more time. Is kind of what it sounds like. It goes up, down, and then it ends on that kind of rattling note as well too, which is really cool. Let's see, does we do it again? I don't remember. I'll play it one more time. So overall, a very fun song to listen to. Sorry if I called it a call. It's one of those things where it's pretty reflexive. And then this is the call. So with the call, it's a very quick 2-note call, right? It's a towhee. Sometimes you may not hear that first inflection. It's very fast, but it honestly sounds like it's just saying its name. So that he part is very easy to hear. And of course, they can have a variety of other kind of inflections or different types of notes depending on what's going on. You can also have variation geographically. So your northeastern populations might sound different from your southwestern populations, depending on like how large that range map is, which these guys have a pretty good chunk that they're kind of going with. So there might be some slight variations, but in our case, those two are kind of pretty distinctive for our location there as well too, which is nice. So this is also an example of some different species of towhees you can find all throughout North America. Like I mentioned earlier, there's 6 different species. We've got our Eastern Towhee, Spotted Towhee, Canyon Towhee, California Towhee, Green-tailed Towhee, and Albert's Towhee. I think I remembered all those. Woo! So the Eastern Towhee is who we have. Because it has a larger range, there are also subspecies of that Eastern Towhee. So there are white-eyed populations that are, again, still close enough to be Eastern Towhees, but they do have that white iris, which can be very distinctive for that as well too. Along with that, a little bit more Midwest, we have that spotted towhee who looks very similar to the Eastern. At one point, these two were actually labeled under the same species, so the rufous-sided towhee, if I remember right. And eventually, as with anything, when we learn more about them and we find more differences between them, we decide it's better to just kind of separate those into 2 distinct species. That said, they are kind of closely related enough that sometimes they do hybridize, so you can have an individual that has markings from both and songs from both, which can be really interesting as well too. Does not happen frequently, but that does happen sometimes with certain species when those populations overlap just a smidge. And a lot of your other Western towhee populations kind of have smaller ranges. They're not as wide or varying as the Eastern or the spotted. So the Canyon towhee is another one that has a slightly large range, but and of course his colors, you can tell, are a lot more muted in comparison to the spotted and the Eastern. So one thing you can determine, though, is these birds all have a very similar body shape, similar beak size and shape, and there are some markings that can look kind of similar as well, too. But the shape is one of those distinctive things for ID whenever you're getting started, is when you know a bird's shape, you can also usually knock it down to a certain family or a certain group, which can be very helpful for ID before even looking at any coloration. So with these birds being in the sparrow family, you think they'd primarily focus on a lot of seeds, but actually these birds are omnivorous. They do also focus on fruits or insects depending on the time of year. So oftentimes, like many birds, they'll focus on insects in the summertime because that is a great resource of protein, which is great for, good morning, Jenny. Thanks so much for hopping in. But they'll focus on that protein, which is great for a lot of nesting purposes and also feather growth and things like that in the summer season. And then as those resources start to dwindle, they'll focus more on fruits or seeds in the wintertime. Now, just like their overall habitat where they stay, which is those low shrubs and very kind of crowded areas in regards to debris and things like that, these guys also forage in that dense, low cover. So they don't move very far. They can forage in more open areas if that cover is nearby, but that cover is very important for them because these guys are more of a solitary species, unlike other types of sparrows who might forage in flocks and can kind of watch each other's backs. These guys kind of forage by themselves, so the second they see danger, they have to go immediately because they don't know how much time they have. So they usually stay in those kinds of more crowded, low, busy shrub places. Now, something that is fun about any sparrow species is their ground foraging style, which I will never get tired of. So what they do is a kind of scratch behavior. So basically, as they're searching for different seeds or insects, they have to move a lot of leaf litter and debris out of their way. So what a lot of sparrow species will do is they'll hop forward, they'll scratch litter out of the way, and return back to their original position. So it usually can make a huge mess, which is a lot of fun. But it is a behavior that is very hard to miss when you start seeing it, which is an absolute joy on my end. But essentially, this allows them to kind of move litter out of the way so they can access different food options as well too. So, and then again, this is a nice female towhee. You can tell from that nice brown coloration versus the black as well. And of course, if they've got food items that are a little bit larger for them to handle at one time, basically what they'll do is they'll just kind of rotate and bite that food item. A lot of different birds will do this, especially with like heavier seeds and things like that as well too. So if you've got a good pair of binoculars, you can kind of usually watch a bird manipulate a seed in its mouth to kind of crack it open. Same with fruits and other things like that as well. So I mentioned on that last slide that these birds are primarily solitary. You're not really going to see more than one or two at a time. You might hear more than one or two at a time, but definitely they're very kind of shy or inconspicuous. When they're moving, it's usually through a lot of hops. They're not walking like starlings do. They're not flying too often unless they're kind of getting out of the way. So they usually focus a lot on that kind of locomotion, which can help with ID too. And they're also highly competitive. We don't get to see enough of it because, again, they're usually off in the bushes doing their own kind of thing. But the males are highly competitive with other males. Their size of the territory they have during nesting season depends entirely on the food availability. So if there's a lot of food resources in one small space, that's the area they'll kind of defend. And then if there's more food over a larger range, they'll kind of defend a larger range if needed. So it really just depends on the resources available. There are a lot of different displays these birds kind of employ, from various types of quivering to debris carrying, which is apparently a very submissive behavior for maybe a competing male in the area. Same with like body puffs or things too. But I was able to find some videos, which is really cool. So these move by pretty quick, but when they're competing with other males, Towhees will often do a wing flag. So this is just to kind of show off and I guess show certain signs of things. And essentially what we're going to look at with this video, because it's a shorter one, is this top right bird. Essentially you're going to notice he's going to lift one wing down and up again. And that's kind of that flagging behavior. So you think it wouldn't be much of anything. And he also fans his tail too. So he's showing off those white spots and everything as well. So I'm going to play that one more time when it gives me the chance. But again, pay attention really closely in that top right corner. So 1, 2, that tail is fanned. He's definitely sending some signals, and he's probably going to chase after him because he's got other things to say as well too. So it's a very interesting behavior. And then this one is blurry. I understand that, but you can get the general motion because we all know, depending on where we're at, we're never going to get that huge visibility from certain birds, depending on where they're stationed and what we're using to see them. So essentially, he lifts one side, that kind of fluttering flag motion, and then he lifts the other and kind of does the same thing. I'll play that one more time. So these are actually just different displays that these birds will utilize to kind of compete with each other during nesting season as well. So I found those super interesting because again, I didn't know they were that competitive until I started doing some research. They are so competitive, the males, that they will also chase females away from their territory, and the female is more passive, so she just kind of withdraws while calling to let them know, like, hey, I'm supposed to be checking this out. And eventually he gets his hormones in gear where he goes, oh yeah, you are supposed to be looking over here. So that is a common occurrence that can happen as well. Essentially the females will check the territory the male has chosen and the male himself and decide whether or not they want to pair off for that season. Towhees can pair together for multiple nesting seasons, so you can have them for 2 or 3 seasons in a row, or it may just be one. So it just depends on the pair as well. When it comes to nest building in that kind of nesting season, which we're almost at the end of, in general, nesting season's March through August, so you might have some kind of leftover last-minute nesting in September or some final fledging happening then, but we're getting close to the end of that. But when they're getting started, the female will build a nest in 5 days. And it's not like she's wasting the whole day working on this nest. She works a few hours each morning, calls it good, and then starts again the next day. And oftentimes when they build these nests, they will utilize a ground nest. So that's actually a very common strategy between a lot of different types of birds, is that kind of ground nest rather than in the trees, like what we may be used to investigating, right? So they'll usually make like a large outer cup nest with like bark strips, twigs, and dead leaves, sometimes string and cardboard, depending on what's in the area. And then they kind of line it with fine grasses, rootlets, or animal hair as well too. Sometimes it can be a little bit more exposed, and sometimes it's a little bit more protected. It just depends on what they feel is a better nesting site. They can have anywhere from 1 to 3 broods. So basically they can nest once, they can nest up to 3 times in one summer. And that can have anywhere from 2 to 6 eggs, maybe closer to 3 or 4, depending on the circumstance. And in general, with different songbird species, the color of their egg varies depending both on individual and species, which is really cool. So you can have variation in the same species. So each Eastern Towhee can lay different colored eggs, but a lot of that speckling pattern can be very similar. So egg ID is very tricky depending on like size and the nest it's in and all that kind of stuff as well too. Once they've laid all their eggs, they'll start incubating, and incubation can take 12 to 13 days, so a little bit less than 2 weeks. And then when all those eggs hatch, nesting takes another 10 to 12 days. So again, a little less than 2 weeks. So about like 4 weeks later, these guys are done out of the nest and fledged. When they first hatch, they are altricial young. So you can see from this picture here that they're very pink. There's not a lot of feathers. They are blind. They can't really do much, and the parent require a lot of parental care. And both parents do care for the young at this point in time. And when they do finally fledge after that nesting period, that oftentimes they'll kind of stay in the same area for another 3 to 4 weeks after fledging, and the parents will still feed them as well too. So hopefully my sound hasn't been horrible this entire time. We're gonna see, let's see, I'm gonna keep this down though. So one thing that's really fun about Eastern Towhees in general is obviously your male and your female are very strikingly different and they're super pretty, and your juveniles look completely different from your adults. Usually, like, for example, with bluebirds, like juvenile bluebirds, you can tell there's speckling on them that makes them a little bit different, but oftentimes they do have blue tinted feathers even after they leave. Eastern Towhee fledglings look absolutely nothing like that. So that's just a really fun video of a juvenile getting fed, and that's a fledgling. And again, with your fledglings, like, they oftentimes don't look entirely put together, and that's okay. The point is they need to leave the nest as soon as possible so they don't get attacked by any predators, because the longer they're there, the more any scents or anything might potentially attract those types of predators as well. So this is just a good example of what some of those birds may look like over time. So this top left is an Eastern Towhee fledgling. This is kind of the one that we just saw in another video. You'll see that the head, the wings, and the lack of tail are all a lot darker in coloration than the belly, which has a lot of different speckling. So they look absolutely nothing like the adults at this stage. Fledglings in general often have a very short tail, and all of their wings aren't completely put together. That's a normal stage at this point in time. It's very normal to see them out of the nest as well too. So make sure that if you see a fledgling, wait sometimes like an hour and a half away from the fledgling if it's in a safe spot, to potentially see if the parents come in from any direction to potentially feed that young as well too. So parents don't necessarily monitor their young right there when they are fledged. But this is also a really good example of how that kind of, those feather patterns can camouflage a bird as they are young and a little bit more vulnerable, right? So this right photo is an example of an Eastern Towhee juvenile. So he has all his feathers. He's getting his adult plumage in. So we're getting a mix of that kind of fledgling feather pattern, as well as the adult feather pattern as well too. So his head is still a lot of that juvenile plumage, and just because the background is blurry, it doesn't really make too much of a difference, but you can tell just from here how well that coloration camouflages these guys if they stay quiet and pretty inconspicuous. But also, this is my favorite time of year because you have those juveniles look an absolute mess. They've got patches of adult plumage, patches of juvenile plumage, and they don't know what's going on, and it's my favorite thing in the world. And then bottom left, we also have a very good example of I'm pretty certain, a female. Lighting can always be an issue because you have those kinds of that cinnamon brown kind of color on the wings and the tail. You've got a little bit of the white feathers coming in on the belly, as well as the kind of that rufous red siding as well too, but you still have some speckling and everything, and that beak is not quite as dark yet as the adults too, which is, again, really fun. So it's just fun to watch this time of year as they kind of get their lives together. It's my favorite part. Lastly, some ways to potentially attract these guys to the yard. Obviously, that kind of habitat is very important to them to have. So if you don't have a lot of shrubs in your area, if it's more open and kind of less protected, they may not be as interested right away. So that is definitely something to consider. But if you do, again, these guys are primarily ground feeders. They're not really to be found super high up in trees. If they are feeding from trees, they have to have a nice stable perch. But for the most part, they're most comfortable on the ground. So you can offer food on the ground. You can do tray or platform feeders, whether that's sitting on the ground or hanging somewhere. Placing it closer to kind of shrubby habitat. If you have a lot of issues with a lot of predators in the area, then you might need to consider whether or not that's something you want to risk. But if it's pretty safe overall and you don't have a lot of outdoor predators, like, again, outdoor cats or things like that that can cause issues, then you could definitely put it kind of closer to kind of help make them feel more comfortable. And honestly, two food items that might be great for Eastern Towhees in general. One is white millet. You can usually get this in a lot of different seed blends. This is usually kicked out of the feeder and lands right on the ground, so it can be a little bit messier, but it is great for birds like Eastern Towhees, other sparrows, juncos in the wintertime as well too, and doves. Doves are a huge fan of it. But also, honestly, you could offer de-shelled sunflower seed. De-shelled sunflower seed is easy for everybody to kind of crack open and deal with, and is always a big hit. So even if that ends up on the ground, somebody's going to be taking advantage of it. And a good blend, for example, to utilize that we have would be the deluxe blend, because that has your black oil sunflower, safflower, and some white millet in there as well too, which is a great option for ground feeders. So if you want to potentially try and get those Eastern Towhees coming a little bit more frequently to your feeder, you could try something with some white millet in there as well. Now, let's say you have a more open habitat, you want to try and make it more inviting for your Eastern Towhees or other species in the area. That is not necessarily a bad thing, or that is something to consider, because like many other birds, Eastern Towhees populations have dropped in the last 50 years, primarily due to habitat loss. Again, they prefer that shrubby kind of overgrown habitat that's more comfortable for them. And as we continue kind of urbanizing certain places and removing that without adding anything to supplement it, that is going to cause an issue with overall resources that they can utilize. So some things to consider that might be great for them if you want to kind of make it more friendly for Eastern Towhees specifically. If you have any oak trees in the area, that's actually a great resource in general. Obviously, they're not going to be going all the way up into the oak trees, but sometimes they'll utilize acorns as well too. So that's one of those seeds they would definitely kind of have to work on over time. But shrubs are kind of a main focus point for this for sure. Things like aromatic sumac, which is different from poison sumac, serviceberry, American beautyberry, Yaupon holly, American holly, elderberry, winterberry, a lot of different shrubs that are kind of low-lying, produce fruits in like the wintertime or during certain times of year, and just provide that good cover, are great not only for towhees, but a wide variety of other birds. These birds will also utilize things like ragweed, smartweed, or other grasses, because seed grasses can also be helpful, and fruits like blackberries or blueberries are also high on a towhees list as well. And if you haven't considered it, certifying your yard to become a wildlife habitat by utilizing food, water, shelter, places to raise young, and sustainable practices are great things to utilize. Fall is oftentimes another season for like planting and getting gardens set up and all that kind of stuff. So I know native plant sales will probably be happening in the fall, so that is also stuff to think about as well too, if you've never considered that before. If you have questions about that, definitely feel free to stop in and ask about it as well too. And with that said, that's probably all I have to mention about Eastern Towhees today. A lot of the images and the video came from Macaulay Library at the Cornell Lab of Ornithology, which is a great kind of resource where everybody from all around the world uploads videos, photos, audio, so people can get a look at obviously different birds and their different behaviors, which is super awesome as well too. Birds of the World is another resource where I got a lot of information too. Allaboutbirds.org is a very digestible resource for easy learning about birds in like your area and what you want to learn more about as well too. And you can also check out like certifying your yard with the NWF, and then also audubon.org/native-plants also offers a good resource for what native plants are great for birds in your area, depending on your zip code as well too. So lots of different resources and stuff to check out as well too. That being said, if anybody is planning on coming in the store today, we do have a $5 off a $25 purchase or more that you can use. Just mention Towhee at the counter, and if you also mention this, I'll know you came to the presentation, so I can easily stamp that bingo card as well. But I like it more when we have fun facts, so tell me a fun fact if you come in as well. And we do have a second viewing of this presentation in store at 11, so if you know somebody else that is maybe interested in Towhees or is trying to like nail out that bingo card, you can have them check this out as well too. But that being said, thank you guys so much for joining me today. I hope you guys had fun, learn more about your towhees and other birds that you have in the yard, and continue to enjoy hummingbird season, molting season, because I always find that very funny, and just have a good rest of the weekend. I will see you all next time. Thanks!